At 9:42 p.m., the city breathes. Detroit, a city of ghosts and greatness. 1,000 stories unfold behind closed doors and in the quiet glow of streetlights. But on this cold, rain-soaked Tuesday, one story, one life, is about to end. In the vast, buzzing digital landscape, a single message flickers to life on a phone screen. It's from Daniel Okafor, a simple text to his mother, "I'm on my way." A digital echo of a promise, a final glimpse into the mind of a boy just moments from home. A mere 10 minutes from the warmth of his house, the security of his mother's embrace on the city's west side. But Daniel never made it home. The official report, a cold, clinical document from the Detroit Police Department, filled with jargon and excuses, said it was a tragic accident, said he fell, a slip on the wet pavement. But the bruises that covered his body told a different story. They spoke of a different kind of fall, one where someone had pushed. A fall from a grace he never asked for. A descent into a darkness he didn't deserve. And the silence from the very people who should have spoken up, the authorities meant to protect him. It's the loudest, most damning sound in this entire city. It screams of a truth that was not lost, but deliberately buried. A truth that began with a final, unfulfilled promise on a rainy Tuesday night in the Motor City. Daniel Okafor was a promise. At just 19 years old, he carried the unspoken weight of his family's future on his shoulders. But he never complained. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a future. By day, his hands were stained with the indelible grit of grease and oil, turning wrenches and coaxing life back into dead engines at his uncle's garage on Linwood Street. He had an innate, almost magical ability with cars, a natural touch that could make a sputtering, rusted heap of metal purr to life like a contented cat. He was part of Detroit's lifeblood, a new generation of mechanics in a city built on the automobile. To the other kids on the block, he was a quiet hero, the one who would fix their bikes for free, the one who always had a smile and a moment to spare. He was a natural, a mechanical savant, destined to take over the family business. But in the quiet of his evenings, his mind was far from the clamor of the garage. In the solitude of his small bedroom, his hands held a pen instead of a wrench, and his imagination took flight. He was a dreamer. He filled a worn-out notebook with intricate schematics and elaborate drawings for an invention he called the lifter, a drone not designed for flight, but for hope, a contraption he dreamed would help his mother, lifting heavy loads, mending leaky roofs in their aging Detroit home, and building a new life for them all. He was studying tirelessly for his college entrance exam, a path out of the life that seemed to have been decided for him. So when the news broke, it made no sense. This boy, of all people, why him? What could he have done to deserve such a brutal, senseless end? He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a statistic. Daniel was a possibility. His mother, a woman who had known hardship all her life, stood in the hospital hallway, her face etched with a confusion that was even deeper than her grief. She couldn't reconcile the boy she knew with the official story from the DPD of a fall. Daniel didn't fall, he stood up. He stood up for what was right. But in a city grappling with its own ghosts, a city of past glory and present struggles, standing up could be a death sentence. The city's narrative of decline and resilience was well known, and it was a story that often cast young men like Daniel in the role of a suspect, not a victim. His friends and neighbors, at first shocked into silence, began to whisper. They shared stories of Daniel's unwavering integrity, his quiet strength. They spoke of the dreams he had for his family, the plans he meticulously laid out in his notebook. The notebook became a symbol of his lost potential, a tangible representation of everything he was and everything he could have been. The grief was a collective wound, a fresh scar on a community that had already endured too many. But underneath the grief, a question began to fester, a question that refused to be silenced. Who wanted Daniel's possibility extinguished? His dreams, etched in ink on those pages, seemed to taunt the official narrative. A fall? They knew a fall when they saw one. This was something else. This was a deliberate act of violence. This was a message to everyone in the neighborhood. A message that said, your dreams are not safe here. Your aspirations are a threat. This boy, who was meant to fly, was grounded by the very system meant to protect him. The city watched as the hope that Daniel represented was slowly crushed, leaving behind only the dust of a shattered dream. The funeral was a sea of black umbrellas, a collective shield against the relentless rain. But the downpour from the sky was nothing compared to the tears that fell. Daniel's mother, a woman who had seen so much sorrow, stood straight and strong, her gaze fixed on the casket. She refused to believe the lie. She refused to let her son be just another statistic in Detroit's complex crime history. As the casket was lowered, she clutched the worn notebook, its pages filled with the hope and dreams that were now so cruelly gone. His friends, his family, everyone who knew him, struggled to make sense of the senseless. They couldn't understand why this boy, this beacon of hope, had been chosen. Was it simply a random act of violence? A case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time in a sprawling, diverse urban environment? Or was there something more sinister at play? Something that went deeper than a simple street encounter? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, festering, and slowly transforming from quiet doubt into a burning, collective anger. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a call to action. And Detroit, which had been silent for so long, was about to find its voice. On Tuesday, a storm rolled in. A cold front descended on the city, carrying with it a heavy, deliberate rain. Daniel began his walk home, just a short distance from the safety of his front door on Detroit's west side. But in this part of town, safety was never guaranteed. It was a fragile illusion, a whispered prayer. And on this night, the shadows held more than just rain. Eyewitnesses in the apartments overlooking the street saw it. The dark van, no markings, no clear license plate, just a menacing silhouette in the falling darkness, a dark omen on four wheels, pulled up to Daniel. Then came the lights, not the comforting, sweeping lights of a rescue vehicle, but the sharp, blinding flash of a predator. A brief, terrifying moment of chaos before the darkness returned. There are two sides to this story. The official one, from the Detroit Police Department, is a lie. Claims Daniel ran. Claims he fell while trying to escape. But what does a fall look like? It doesn't look like the deep, patterned bruises that covered Daniel's back. They were not from a hard impact, but from a deliberate, repeated beating. It doesn't look like the chemical burns on his arms, a detail mysteriously absent from the official report. And it certainly doesn't look like the deep ligature marks on his wrists, as if he had been restrained. The doctors at Henry Ford Hospital had no answers. They just shook their heads and avoided eye contact. The hospital staff, when asked, only whispered, their voices filled with fear. And a city held its breath, waiting for a truth that never came. The DPD report was a masterpiece of obfuscation. It mentioned the rain, the slippery street, the victim's panicked attempt to flee, but it left out every single detail that pointed to foul play. The van was described as unidentified. The witnesses were described as unreliable. The evidence that didn't fit their narrative was simply ignored. The family, grieving and desperate for answers, found their questions met with a wall of silence. The officers who showed up at their door offered condolences, not answers. Their expressions were carefully neutral, their words rehearsed. It was clear to Daniel's mother that they weren't there to investigate. They were there to manage the narrative, a common practice in a city where trust in law enforcement had long been a fragile thing. Daniel's mother, a formidable woman with a will of iron, refused to be managed. She went to the Detroit Police Department's headquarters. She pleaded, she begged, she demanded, but her voice was a lonely one in a system designed to silence dissent. She was given a copy of the official report, a document that read more like fiction than fact. The report claimed Daniel resisted arrest, a phrase so common in these reports it had lost all meaning. It was a convenient way to justify brutality, a simple phrase that sealed the fate of countless young men like Daniel. But his mother refused to let that phrase define her son. She knew the truth. She saw it in his eyes, even in the unconscious state he was in. She saw it in the bruises, the burns, the marks on his wrists. And as the days turned into weeks, She began her own investigation. She spoke to the neighbors. She retraced Daniel's steps. She discovered a hidden security camera in an apartment complex across the street from where the incident occurred. The camera, she was told, had been malfunctioning that night. A convenient excuse, a lie so common it was a punchline. The city held its breath, a collective gasp of a community that had seen this play out before. They knew the script. They knew how the story ended. The victim would be blamed. The authorities would be exonerated. The truth would be buried. But this time, something felt different. Daniel was different. His death was a wound that refused to close. It was a symbol of a deeper sickness in the city, a malignancy that had been festering for years. And this time, a single, grieving mother and a community tired of silence were about to challenge the system that had long oppressed them. The sprawling, diverse urban environment of Detroit was about to become a battleground for justice. They buried Daniel, but the truth remained unburied. His family, devastated and desperate, demanded answers. The Detroit Police Department offered only excuses. The body cam footage? Malfunctioning, they said. The witnesses, the brave few who had initially spoken up, were suddenly silent, their memories replaced by fear. A week after the funeral, Daniel's mother was threatened. An anonymous phone call in the middle of the night. A low voice said, "Your son was in an accident. Don't make your life one too." They all knew what it meant. This wasn't just about Daniel. It was about a pattern, a system, a conspiracy of silence that stretched from the streets to the highest offices in the city. For years, young men from Detroit's neighborhoods had been disappearing, only to turn up bruised, beaten, or worse. The official reports were always the same: an accident, a fall. But the families knew better. The city knew. Everyone just pretended they didn't. This silence, this acceptance, it's a form of control. It's what keeps people afraid to speak up. It's what allows power to hide in the shadows. But what if one person finally breaks? What if one person who was there that night finally decides to speak the truth? Daniel's story, as devastating as it was a familiar one. It was a worn-out narrative, a tired script that had been replayed countless times in countless families. The city had grown accustomed to it, learning to look away, to whisper in hushed tones, to accept the unacceptable. It was a silent agreement between the powerful and the powerless. The powerful got to maintain control, and the powerless got to maintain a semblance of peace, a fragile existence built on the foundation of fear. But Daniel's death was different. It was a scream in a city that had learned to whisper. The media, at first hesitant, began to pick up on the story. Local news outlets ran short, sympathetic pieces. But they were careful, always sticking to the official narrative, always including the police's statement. They were part of the system too, a cog in the machine that kept the truth buried. But the online world, the forums, the blogs, they were different. People who had been silenced for years began to share their stories. Stories of brothers, of cousins, of friends who had fallen. The thread that connected them all was the dark, unmarked van. The ligature marks, the same official report, the same lie. Daniel's mother became a symbol of this quiet rebellion. She refused to give interviews to anyone who wouldn't tell the full story. She organized peaceful protests outside the Detroit Police Department's headquarters. She held up a picture of her son, a smiling, hopeful face, and she refused to let them turn him into a statistic. The police responded with indifference at first, then with veiled threats. They tried to intimidate her, to scare her into silence. But she was a mother who had lost her son. There was nothing they could do to her that could possibly be worse than what had already happened. The city watched. The people who had been complicit in their silence for so long began to feel a stirring, a prick of conscience, the whisper of a thought. What if we're next? The fear was a powerful deterrent, but injustice was a stronger motivator. Daniel's death had broken the silent agreement. It had exposed the rot at the core of the city. And for the first time in years, a great American city was not just whispering. It was beginning to speak. Tonight, Daniel's file sits sealed in a vault in a city that's trying to rewrite its own history. It is a locked and forgotten chapter in a city's history. But sealed doesn't mean closed, because a witness has come forward. A man who was there that night. A man who claims he saw it all. He claims Daniel didn't just fall. He claims Daniel was alive when they put him in the van. But then, he says he saw something that changed everything. He says Daniel dropped something as he was being forced into the van. Not his notebook, but a woman's. A diary filled with secrets that connected this case to another, a case that was officially closed about 2 missing girls. The Caldwell twins, from a quiet Alabama town, who vanished a summer before. Voice grows more intense, a devastating reveal, but that's not the twist. The devastating twist is, this witness, this man who has now come forward, his name is Leo, and he wasn't a stranger. He was the driver of that very van. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he was, because Daniel had called him. He was supposed to be Leo's alibi, to save him from a murder charge that happened just hours before. The driver of the blue pickup, the one who made the Caldwell twins vanish into thin air, was Leo. And the truth Daniel died protecting wasn't about himself at all. It was a secret that could expose a city's darkest conspiracy. The diary, the final, damning piece of the puzzle. Daniel had found it, tucked away in an old, abandoned house on the city's outskirts. It was a diary that belonged to Grace Caldwell. He had read it. He knew the truth. He knew what really happened to the sisters. He knew who was responsible. And he had decided to do the right thing, to go to the police. But he couldn't trust them. He couldn't trust the system. So he called Leo, the one person he thought he could trust. A man he knew from the neighborhood, a man who worked for the police. The one person he thought would help him expose the truth. He never knew. He never knew that the man he was running to for help was the very man who had stolen the girls. He never knew that Leo had his own dark secrets to hide. The last moments of Daniel's life were filled with a terrible, gut-wrenching realization. The person he trusted, the person he believed would help him bring justice, was the very person who was about to take his life. The van pulled away, a ghost in the night, carrying not just a body, but a devastating secret that linked the heart of Detroit to a small town in Alabama. And now, decades later, Leo has come forward. He's old, sick, and haunted by the ghosts of his past. He can't live with the silence anymore. He can't live with the weight of the secrets he has kept. He wants to confess. He wants to tell the world what happened that night. He wants to explain why Daniel had to die. But the truth Daniel died protecting wasn't about himself. It was a secret that could expose a city's darkest conspiracy. It was a secret that could tear a powerful family apart. It was a secret that could finally bring peace to a family that had been waiting for 20 years. But it was a secret that came at the cost of a boy's life. And it was a secret that the city had tried to bury. But shadows can't hide forever. And silence has a way of speaking, if you dare to listen.